Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Rabbi Stern. And thank you, Rabbi Russell and Sammy Weiser and everyone else who made this weekend possible, both for tonight and for the lunch tomorrow, and those who made this possible in memory of Henry Schlinger, who served this congregation as congregation president and in so many other ways. It is so wonderful to be back at Temple Emanu-El and to have this opportunity to speak tonight and tomorrow. As Rabbi Stern said, Temple Emanu-El has long been a special place for me and for my family, really going back for generations, all the way to when my great-grandfather served as congregation president, not quite here, but where Emanu-El was at the time, and then my father served as congregation president in the many years that both my parents have served in leadership roles here. It's also where I and my siblings, Carolyn and Keith, grew up in Hebrew school and Sunday school and the Dafta youth group. And I especially appreciate that my brother Keith, my sister Carolyn, and one of her sons Harlan, as well as my parents Bob and Joni and my wife Shubida, could be here and come up from Austin and Houston to share in this occasion. I'm not someone who likes to make much of a fuss about my birthday, and so I didn't let that fact get in the way that today is my birthday when Rabbi Russell suggested it as one of the two possibilities of weekends when we might be able to have this symposium. And I didn't realize it then until I got around to preparing these remarks that would actually mean when this time falls in the month of Elul, that this week's Torah portion, Ki Tetzei, would be the same one that I read from at my bar mitzvah 35 years ago, right down the hall in Olin Sanctuary. I hope I don't look a day beyond 34 years past my bar mitzvah. This timing also means that we've just finished reading the Torah portion, Shoftim, from last weekend, with its famous line, "Justice, justice, you shall pursue." That command to pursue justice has been taken as a clarion call throughout the ages, imploring us to do all we can to advance justice in all its forms, including standing up for social justice and for human rights and the well-being of all of those in need in whatever way that may take, and yes, as well as protecting the environment. Rabbis and commentators and philosophers have been pondering for millennia why that word justice, or tzedek in Hebrew, is repeated twice. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. Some of those scholars, like the medieval Jewish philosopher Abraham ibn Ezra, teach that this repetition of justice means that we must pursue justice not just now, but again and again throughout our lives and across generations. Others say the repetition refers not just to the when, but to the who we must pursue justice for. They remind us that we must pursue justice not just for ourselves and our neighbors and those in our community, but for the stranger as well, whoever or wherever that stranger may be. And it is my view that by heeding both the dimensions of those teachings, that we must pursue justice across time and across place, from the here and the now to the future generations around the world, that we can connect this command to the unique challenge of addressing climate change. Tomorrow's Torah portion, the one that I read from, tells us a bit more about the justice that we must pursue in the here and now, in caring for the hungry and conserving our environment. It tells us we must leave behind the overleaked sheaves in the field, leave behind the spare olives on the trees, the spare grapes on the vines in the orchard, and to leave them for the stranger, for the orphan, and for the widow. When my son and I volunteer at the Houston Food Bank, or when Temple Emanu-El once again hosts its hunger relief drives, as it does each high holidays, we are heeding those commandments to care for people right here, right now, in our own communities. And when it comes to caring for our local environment, we're actually doing a pretty good job. The air that we breathe today here in Dallas, or when I'm at home in Houston, is far cleaner than the air was when I or my parents were growing up in each of those cities. even though we still have a long way to go to make the air even cleaner. Acid rain, for the most part, no longer threatens our forests or our streams and aquatic life. And the leaded gasoline that was at its worst when I was a baby no longer poisons our air. The Trinity River that I passed over on my way up I-45 this afternoon was once known as the River of Death, since it carried down the pollution from the slaughterhouses of Fort Worth and the sewage, and it was a conveyor of typhoid and other diseases all the way up until the 1920s and beyond. Now it's clean enough that it's purified into the source of drinking water, both for Dallas, and flows down to us in Houston, filling the reservoirs where we get our own drinking water, and serves as a safe habitat for thousands of fish and birds. In other words, when we can smell or breathe or taste or see the benefits of cleaning up our own local environment, we do a pretty good job of doing so. But climate change poses a more vexing challenge. Unlike the air pollutants that hurt our lungs but rain out within a few days, the carbon dioxide that warms the climate stays in the air for centuries. The effects of that warming might be manageable, perhaps not so pleasant, for those of us who live in Texas and enjoy wall-to-wall air conditioning everywhere we go, but they'll far harder on people in even hotter climates where air conditioning isn't so ubiquitous, and on people who can't afford to make their homes more resistant to stronger hurricanes or raise them up above rising waters. The impacts will fall especially hard on the world's poorest nations, where it may be impossible to relocate communities hit by rising seas or wildfires or increasingly strong storms. And the biggest burdens will be borne not by the people who are emitting the most pollution today, but by the less well-off people for generations to come, as both temperatures and sea levels continue to rise. Now, some economists tell us not to worry about this too much. Don't worry about these inequities. They might apply discount rates to diminish the value of anything that happens far in the future, and value people based on how much they earn, rather than the intrinsic value that every life is sacred. That lets some economists make the dubious claim that the well-being of poor people in the future doesn't matter as much as the prosperity of wealthy people burning as much fossil fuels as we want today. And of course, economics puts zero value on those overlooked sheaves in the field, the olives or the grapes left on the trees or left on the vines. And it puts no value on leaving fossil fuels unburned in the ground, leaving forests uncut for us and for animals to enjoy. Our Jewish traditions teach differently. The Talmud teaches that to save a single life is to have saved the whole world. Jewish ethics don't diminish people or the natural world down to dollar values. The need to pursue justice, not just for ourselves today, but for strangers across generations, echoes the famous words of Rabbi Hillel. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? We've done pretty well taking care of ourselves, enjoying the comforts of fossil-fueled cars and air conditioning while also cleaning up our local air and water and landscapes. But when it comes to the carbon that will warm the climate for centuries and that will affect people around the world for generations to come, we've only begun to bend the curve on how much we're emitting each year. We fail to recognize the fierce urgency of now, the need to act right away to curtail the gases that are going to keep building up and accumulating in the atmosphere for centuries. As Hillel asked, if not now, when? I chose that quote as the epigraph for my book to emphasize that we must act right now to address the climate crisis. When it comes to climate, it's simply not true that good things come to those who wait. Instead, the faster we act, the faster we're able to drive down the costs of the technologies that we need to replace fossil fuels and to clean up the climate. For most of the technologies we need most to be able to confront climate change, the faster we deploy them, the cheaper they can become, making them available not just for ourselves, but for people around the world. In fact, everything from more efficient LED lights, to solar panels, to batteries, to wind turbines, and on, has become more than 10 times cheaper since I began teaching my energy course at Rice 18 years ago. Through what's known as learning by doing, companies learn how to make products better and cheaper the more they do. Kind of like the same idea that computers have kept getting better since that Commodore 128 that I typed up my bar mitzvah speech on. But companies can only make clean technologies cheaper if they know there will be a market of people willing to buy their products and switch away from the dirtier technologies of the past. When we switch over to those more efficient lights or solar panels or electric cars, we not only reduce our own carbon footprints, but we actually make those technologies more affordable for people to adopt around the world. In other words, the actions we take today, in the here and in the now, actually can make it easier and cheaper for others to keep bending that curve towards a cleaner future. It just takes a bit of effort on our own part to insist that we and our employers and our government do the same, even in cases where the cleaner option hasn't quite yet gotten as cheap as the ones it's replacing. Fortunately, in many cases, the cleaner option has already become better and cheaper than the dirty one, as anyone who has switched our homes over to dimmable LED lights or started driving an electric car has seen. It's now possible to make our homes brighter, better lit, our air a little cleaner, our cars a little quieter, even as we slow down warming for people around the world. We really can act to protect, act for ourselves and for others, improving our local environment while protecting the global climate. We don't need to settle for the logic of the song Dayenu in a bit different season of Passover, which I'm not sure any of us really believe when we sing it at our Passover Seders. Do we really believe it would have been enough if Adonai had brought us out from Egypt, but didn't take us through the sea? Or brought us through the sea, but didn't lead us through the desert and didn't feed us manna to be able to survive the harsh conditions of those 40 years? Just as solving one problem or even two problems isn't really enough. It is not enough to clean up our local air and clean up our local water if we let the world's climate to continue to warm beyond control. Justice, justice you shall pursue reminds us that pursuing justice once is not enough. We must continue to pursue justice through our actions for the environment and climate across both time and across place, from generation to generation and around the world. And so my birthday wish on this Shabbat and this anniversary of my bar mitzvah is that we all find ways to act and to pursue justice in the here and in the now, and with a mindfulness to how our actions affect future generations around the world, whether that is working for a cleaner environment and a cooler climate, or for human rights and for social justice, or whatever form of justice you find most meaningful to you. Shabbat Shalom.